Chapter 10. After the temple, the streets of Jerusalem lay silent, but not with peace. Drifted like snow, settling on the blackened stones where the temple had once stood. The sanctuary that had pulsed at the heart of Jewish life for centuries was gone, reduced to rubble and memory. Roman standards fluttered above the ruins, a cruel reminder that the empire's power was absolute. For those who walked among the smoldering ruins, the air carried not only the stench of fire but the heavy scent of loss, the loss of a center, of certainty, of God's house on earth. Some survivors knelt, pressing their foreheads against the still warm stones, whispering psalms through cracked lips. Others turned away in disbelief, eyes hollow. Children asked their mothers why the priests no longer sang, why the altar was silent. In that silence, an old world died, and from it, another was about to be born, one shaped by exile, defiance, and reinvention. The destruction of the temple in 70 CE had left a wound. But history is not merely about wounds, it is about the responses to them. Within decades, this shattered community would face another catastrophe. The Bar Kokhba revolted then. From the ruins of war and dispersion would fashion something enduring, a new way of being Jewish, without the temple, without sovereignty, without Jerusalem. The Bar Kokhba Revolt, the Roman world, was vast, but beneath its marble surface, discontent smoldered like an underground fire. For Jews, the years after the temple's fall were not a time of quiet submission, but of restless hope. Stories circulated of deliverance, of a Messiah who would rise to restore what Rome had stolen. It was during the reign of Emperor Hadrian, in the 2nd century CE, that these hopes crystallized around one man, Simon Bar Kokhba, whom supporters hailed as Bar Kokhba, son of the star. To his followers, he was not merely a military leader, but a divinely chosen redeemer, a Messiah in flesh and blood. Rabbi Akiva, one of the most revered scholars of his age, proclaimed him the fulfillment of prophecy, declaring that the star foretold in the Book of Numbers had finally risen. Kokhba was no dreamer. He was a warrior of steel and will. He drilled his men with merciless discipline, demanding that they demonstrate their readiness by mutilating their own fingers as proof of obedience. His army, numbering perhaps hundreds of thousands, was forged in secret, a shadow force waiting for its moment. The spark came in 132 CE, when Hadrian, whose empire prided itself on cultural uniformity, announced plans to rebuild Jerusalem not as a Jewish city, but as a Roman colony named Aelia Capitolina. On the temple to Injury, on the Temple Mount itself, he proposed to erect a shrine to Jupiter. For Jews, this was not mere provocation. It was desecration. The land of David and Solomon was to be stamped with foreign gods. The revolt ignited like dry tinder. Villages across Judea rose in arms. Roman garrisons, taken by surprise, fell quickly. Jewish rebels cut roads, seized fortresses, and for a brief, shining moment, Judea tasted freedom again. Coins were minted bearing the legend for the freedom of Israel, as if proclaiming to the world that sovereignty had been reborn. The countryside hummed with the sounds of war, the clashing of iron, the pounding of hammers in makeshift forges. The whisper of messianic songs carried on the wind. In caves carved into cliffs, families huddled, storing grain, wine, and weapons. While soldiers moved through tunnels invisible to Roman eyes, it was a war fought not just on open fields but underground, in the very bones of the land. But Rome was not an empire easily mocked. Hadrian summoned his greatest general, Julius Severus, from faraway Britain. Legion after legion marched into Judea, perhaps 12 in total, bearing the weight of the empire's fury. The fighting was brutal, a war of annihilation. Roman legions scorched fields, leveled towns, and hunted rebels through valleys and caves. The land itself became a graveyard. Bar Kokhba fought with ferocity, but even his iron will could not withstand Rome's relentless machine. By 135 CE, the revolt lay in ashes. At Bether, his last stronghold, Bar Kokhba fell, killed in battle, or perhaps betrayed. His followers were slaughtered. Rabbi Akiva, who had once called him Messiah, was captured and executed with unspeakable cruelty. When the dust settled, the devastation was staggering. Cassius Dio, the Roman historian, claimed that over 500,000 Jews were killed. Judea was depopulated, its fields desolate. Survivors were sold into slavery, scattered across the empire like seeds cast by a bitter wind. Expulsion and dispersion after Bar Kokhba's fall, Hadrian sought not only to crush the revolt, but to erase Judea itself. The name of the province was changed to Syria Palestina, a deliberate attempt to sever Jewish ties to the land. Jerusalem was barred to Jews. Only on the day of Tisha B'Av, the anniversary of the temple's destruction, were they permitted to enter and weep at its ruins. Exile, once a punishment, now became a permanent condition. Families trudged along dusty roads toward ports where slave ships waited. Children were torn from parents, households scattered across the empire from the markets of Rome to the towns of North Africa, from the banks of the Tigris to the valleys of Spain. Yet exile did not mean disappearance. In foreign cities, Jewish communities reconstituted themselves with stubborn resilience. They built synagogues, their walls adorned not with sacrifice, but with word Torah, scrolls, prayers, songs. In Babylon, scholars gathered to debate law and tradition. In Alexandria, Jews mingled Hebrew memory with Greek philosophy. In Rome, they carved menorahs on catacomb walls, affirming identity even in death. The diaspora was not chosen, but it became a defining feature of Jewish history. No longer tied solely to one land, the people carried their homeland within them, portable, indestructible, written into their prayers. Each meal began with a blessing that echoed Jerusalem. Each Sabbath ended with a prayer for restoration. And though scattered, they remained bound by invisible threads of faith, memory, and hope. The transformation of Jewish life. Rabbinic Judaism, the temple, had been the axis of Jewish life. Its priests, sacrifices, and rituals had defined the rhythm of days and seasons. With its destruction, one might have expected the faith to collapse, as had so many cults when their sanctuaries were destroyed. But Judaism proved unique. It reinvented itself. In the ashes of Jerusalem, leadership shifted from priests to scholars, the rabbis. These were men steeped in scripture, versed in law, skilled in debate. They carried within them not incense and blood, but words and interpretation. At Yavna, and later in Galilee, they gathered to reconstruct a shattered world. They asked, how could one worship without sacrifice? How could one atone without an altar? The answers they forged were radical. Prayer could substitute for sacrifice. Study could substitute for ritual, and the table of the household could become an altar in miniature. Judaism became a religion of the book, a faith woven from text. The Mishnah, compiled around 200 CE, gathered centuries of oral law, transforming fragile memory into written permanence. Debates and disagreements were preserved, not erased, in acknowledgement that truth could be found in dialogue, not uniformity. Synagogues blossomed as new centers of life. No longer merely places of assembly, they became sanctuaries of prayer, study, and community. One could be Jewish in Sepphoris, in Alexandria, in Rome, without a temple in Jerusalem. The rabbis also reshaped messianic expectation. Bar Kokhba's failure was a warning against reckless hopes. Future messiahs would be awaited with patience, not declared with swords. Redemption would come. But until then, survival demanded law, study, and discipline. This transformation was not without tension. Priestly families mourned their lost status. Zealots seethed at what they saw as surrender. Yet in the long arc of history, Rabbinic Judaism proved the lifeline of continuity. It allowed a people without land, throne, or temple to endure century after century, exile after exile. The Bar Kokhba Revolt revealed the depths of Jewish longing for sovereignty and the terrible costs of challenging Rome. It was a war born of messianic hope, but crushed by imperial power, leaving devastation so profound that Judea ceased to be a Jewish homeland for nearly 2 millennia. The diaspora, though born in tragedy, became paradoxically a source of strength. Spread across continents, Jews developed a resilience forged in diversity. They were vulnerable, yes, but also adaptably, built to thrive under Persian kings, Roman emperors, and later caliphs and Christian monarchs. Rabbinic Judaism was the great innovation of this period. By shifting focus from sacrifice to scripture, it created a religion portable enough to survive exile, deep enough to sustain centuries, flexible enough to adapt to changing worlds. Without this transformation, Judaism might have vanished into the footnotes of history, as did the religions of Moab, Edom, or Philistia. Instead, it endured and enduring. It continued to shape the moral imagination of the world. For modern readers, these events hold resonance beyond antiquity, tension between empire and identity, between assimilation and survival, between memory and reinvention. These are not ancient concerns alone. They echo in every community that has faced conquest, displacement, or the challenge of preserving culture in diaspora. On a hill overlooking Jerusalem, where the temple once stood, grass now grows between the stones. Tourists wander, pilgrims pray, children laugh. Yet beneath the surface, the earth remembers the cries of rebels, the songs of exiles. The whispered debates of Rabbazal are woven into the soil of Judea. History did not end with the temple's destruction. It began again, differently. Out of fire and exile came a new Judaism, a new kind of survival. And as long as the story is told, the ruins are not just ruins, they are foundations.